It all started when I left the house one morning and found a bright yellow envelope stuck to my door. That color was already an omen of bad things to come. It was an HOA fine. I picked up the paper and began to read. Regulation infraction. No more than 4 vehicles parked on the property. Please remove excess cars immediately. I read it again. I shook the paper as if that would make the words change. But no, it was there, very clear. I was being fined for having 5 cars in my garage, and it was at that moment that I had to stop, take a deep breath, and process the level of stupidity I was dealing with. First, all my cars were inside the garage. None of them were strewn across the street, obstructing sidewalks, or serving as perches for the neighborhood pigeons. Secondly, I am literally the owner of the condominium. I'm not saying I'm some big shot who owns a property in there. No, I own the entire plot. I'm the one who developed this condominium, financed the construction of each house, and, in a moment of weakness and over-optimism, thought that letting the residents organize an HOA would be a good idea. Clearly, I was wrong. With the paper fine still in my hand, I went to the garage and looked at my cars. There they were, lined up, gleaming, perfectly parked. An SUV for trips, a luxury sedan for events, a sports car for when I wanted to play the irresponsible millionaire, an electric car for when I pretended to be ecologically conscious and a classic, just because I like to spend money unnecessarily. 5 cars, all in my garage, and somehow that was a problem. But the best was yet to come. The fine was signed by the president of the HOA, Karen, accompanied by a footer stating that repeat offenses could result in legal action and even auction of the property. Auction of my own property in the condominium I own. If that isn't the pure definition of arrogance mixed with a power disorder, I don't know what is. I took a deep breath, trying to decide what my reaction would be. Throw the fine in the garbage can and pretend nothing happened? Find out how far this woman was willing to go with her antics? Well, I've never been one to shy away from a good fight. The next day, I made a point of taking a walk around the condominium and noticing the perfection of the rules that this woman loved so much. I saw poorly cut lawns, houses with colors of dubious taste, toys dumped on the sidewalks. But somehow, the big problem was my private garage. And do you want to know the icing on the cake? While I was walking to the HOA office to make amends, guess who had 2 cars parked on the street, partially blocking the entrance to a house? Karen herself. It was official. I was about to have a lot of fun with this situation. I could have ignored the fine, but where was the fun in that? After all, if someone wants to play at being the boss of the law, the least we can do is show them that they're not the boss of anything. So I marched into the HOA office with the fine paper in my hand and a little smile as if I knew I was about to watch someone hang themselves with their own arrogance. The HOA office was one of those makeshift cubicles inside the community center, a place that was supposed to be used for residents' events, but which the queen of bureaucracy had turned into her private fortress. When I got there was a young, bored receptionist, chewing gum and looking at her cell phone as if she were in line at the bank. I need to speak to Karen. She didn't even look up. Do you have an appointment? Oh, so now I needed an appointment to speak to my own employee? Interesting. Tell her the owner of the condominium is here. The girl finally took her eyes off her cell phone and blinked a few times, looking confused. What's that? That's right, the owner of the condominium. Can you tell him? She quickly got up and disappeared behind a door, while I stood there, looking at the leaflets about permitted gardening standards and approved colors for the facade of the houses, as if we were living in an episode of a suburban dystopia. After a few minutes, the door opened again, and in she came, walking as if she were the president of a country. Arms crossed, nose held high, and that look on her face of someone who doesn't accept being contradicted under any circumstances. Oh, it's you. Yes, it's me. She leaned against the table, analyzing me as if she were about to teach me a moral lesson. If you're here about the fine, I hope you've come to pay it." At that moment, I almost laughed, but I decided to hold back and enjoy the scene until the end. "Actually, I'm here to understand how you came to the brilliant conclusion that you can find me in my own condominium." She frowned, as if I were speaking Greek. "The rules are for everyone, without exception." "Interesting. And who approved this rule banning more than 4 cars in the garage?" She straightened up, trying to keep control of the conversation. "It was voted on by the HOA, like all the rules, and I, as president, ensure that they are enforced." "Right. And did you read the condominium's founding contract?" She blinked. "The foundation contract, the document that establishes the HOA." She rolled her eyes. "I don't see how that's relevant." "Oh, I think it's very relevant, because, according to this contract, all the rules approved by the HOA need to be validated by the owner of the condominium." The silence that followed was delicious. The realization began to dawn on her. Her eyes blinked rapidly, her posture shifted slightly, and I saw her mind trying to connect the dots. "You are saying that?" "Exactly. I own the condominium. I created it here. I set the original rules. And as much as I allowed an HOA to be formed, any new rules need my approval. And guess what? I never approved that one." She went pale. She tried to mumble something, but the only thing that came out was a choke of indignation. I leaned forward a little, enjoying every second of it. "So, tell me, Karen, who exactly do you think has the authority to fine me on my own property?" She opened and closed her mouth a few times, looking like a fish out of water. But, to my surprise, instead of admitting her blunder, she doubled down. "That doesn't change anything. The HOA has the autonomy to establish regulations and ensure order in the community. And where exactly does it say that the HOA can seize a condominium owner's property?" She swallowed. "Well, we have legal means." "What means?" "Because I reviewed every clause of the bylaws before approving this HOA, and I can assure you that there is no law within this condominium that forces me to sell or auction my property." She began to tremble slightly, but still clung to her pose of superiority. "You're disrespecting the community." I let out a short laugh. "Disrespecting the community? I'm the only one here who follows the rules. Meanwhile, your truck is parked right out front, blocking half the street. Do you want me to call a tow truck?" It was the first time I saw fear in her eyes. By now, the receptionist was watching the scene as if it were an episode of a reality TV show. I was savoring every second of it, but I wasn't finished yet. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and started scrolling the screen as if I were looking for something. "Oh, and there's one more thing. I've decided to make some small changes to the management of the condominium." She frowned. "What kind of changes?" "Let's just say, as of today, the presidency of the HOA is suspended until further notice." She froze. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can, because as the owner of the condominium, I have veto power over any decision the HOA makes, including temporarily dissolving the board while I audit the rules that were implemented without my approval." She went red, white, then red again. "That's an abuse of power." "Karen, darling," I smiled. "If there's anyone here abusing power, it's definitely not me." And with that, I got up and left the office, leaving her standing there, probably about to explode. But I knew it wasn't over yet. A person like her doesn't accept losing without trying one last desperate attack. And I'd been waiting for that. I knew it wasn't going to end easily. Karen wasn't the type to accept losing, even less so when that defeat involved being publicly unmasked and reduced to a mere spectator in her own power play. So I was just waiting for the inevitable desperate attack. And, as expected, she didn't disappoint. 2 days after my little announcement that the HOA presidency was suspended, the woman came charging back. I already knew something was up when I woke up to find a group of neighbors whispering in front of my house. "Have you seen the email from the HOA?" one of them asked me, with an expression like he'd just seen a soap opera gossip. "Non bother." "Should I?" He looked away and whispered, "She's saying you've been deposed as owner." It took me a whole second to process the level of insanity in that sentence. The neighbor opened his cell phone and showed me the email. It was an official statement from the HOA, signed by Karen herself, saying that the original owner of the condominium had been removed for disagreement with the principles of the community. In other words, according to her, I no longer owned anything. Need I say that I started laughing? Not a normal laugh, a laugh of pure disbelief, almost hysterical. Because you see, until then, I'd thought this woman was just an insufferable control freak, but now she was delusional to the point of organized crime, and the best was yet to come. The email called for an extraordinary meeting to discuss the new management of the condominium. Now tell me, what was I going to do? Of course I was going to show up. The meeting was called for that very evening in the community hall. Curiosity in the condominium was so high that practically everyone showed up, including residents who had never bothered to go to an HOA event in their lives. Karen was there, standing in the center of the room with her Lady Justice posture, holding a stack of papers and talking to some of the more influential residents. She was clearly preparing to make a big speech, perhaps hoping to emerge as the new absolute queen of the condominium. Little did she know that I was about to turn her into a public joke. When I entered the room, the buzz increased. Some people already knew the truth. Others were just there to see the circus go down in flames. Karen cleared her throat and began to speak. Good evening, everyone. We have called this meeting to resolve a serious problem that threatens the harmony of our community. She paused dramatically, looking at everyone as if she were about to reveal a terrible crime. In recent days, the owner of the condominium has demonstrated a stance that goes against the rules that maintain the order and beauty of our neighborhood. As such, the HOA has taken the difficult decision to remove him from office and begin the process of transitioning to a more responsible administration. Absolute silence filled the room. You could hear a cricket breathing, until someone whispered, "Could she do that?" No, she couldn't, and that's exactly why I was there. In my best calm, casual tone of voice, I raised my hand. I'm sorry. Just to clarify, are you saying that the HOA removed someone's property? Karen smiled, thinking she was in control. The HOA has the autonomy to do whatever is necessary for the good of the community. Oh, that's interesting, because I talked to my lawyer this morning, and he assured me that this is not only ridiculous, but completely illegal. The buzz in the room increased. Karen tried to keep her composure, but it was clear that she didn't expect me to go through with this nonsense so quickly. Well, the HOA has certain jurisdictions. Yes, and none of them involve taking possession of a private condominium. She pressed her lips together, but I wasn't finished. So, since we're here to discuss the new administration, I think you'll all be happy to know that I officially filed for the dissolution of the HOA this morning. The shock on her face was better than anything I could have planned. What? That's right. As the owner, I can dissolve the HOA at any time. And I've decided that this condominium has suffered enough with pointless bureaucracy. As of next week, the HOA ceases to exist. The room turned into pandemonium, half the people celebrating, the other half in shock. Some older residents looked at each other, as if they had been waiting for this for years. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to have been punched in the soul. "This is an abuse of power," she shouted. "Abuse of power is making up rules to fine others for things that don't even exist." I shrugged. "But don't worry, Karen. Now you'll have plenty of free time to park as many cars as you want on the street." She went silent, completely defeated. Well, I left the meeting a hero. Residents came up to thank me, shaking my hand, saying that finally someone had put that woman in her place. But Karen? Karen left without saying anything, because at the end of the day, even she realized that she had lost badly. If the HOA meeting was a spectacle of public humiliation for Karen, the next day was the real collapse of her empire of idiotic rules. The news spread like wildfire. In less than 24 hours, everyone knew that the HOA was officially dissolved and that Karen was no longer in charge of anything, which meant that she no longer had control over the condominium, which meant that all her sacred rules had turned to dust. And, above all, it meant that all the shit she'd done over the last few years was about to come back to haunt her. I was calmly enjoying my breakfast when I heard a loud knock on my door. Ah, here comes the outburst. When I opened it, there she was, her eyes wide, her breathing fast, her hair so disheveled that she looked like she'd fought a hurricane and lost. But, contrary to what I expected, she wasn't screaming. She was shaking. "You've ruined everything." I looked at her, feigning a confused expression. "What do you mean?" "The HOA, the condominium, the structure. Nobody respects anything anymore." I crossed my arms. "Well, Karen, maybe because that structure was never meant to be respected. Maybe because it was just a pretext for you to feel important." She froze, as if the words were physically painful. "You don't understand." "No, Karen, you don't understand. This was never your empire. It's never been your private fiefdom where you could call the shots without consequences. You tried to make everyone's life a living hell out of sheer need for control." She clenched her fists. "You'll regret it." I smiled. "Ah, I've heard that before. Now tell me, what's your plan? Find me again? Take my land by force?" "Oh, yeah. You can't." And that's where the best part came in. Karen was so busy trying to intimidate me that she didn't realize the whole condominium was watching. Neighbor after neighbor came out to see the show, some holding cups of coffee, others crossing their arms and watching with smiles on their faces. Because now, she no longer had any power over them. And when she realized that no one feared her anymore, her expression changed. That's when it finally hit her. Karen no longer had authority. She no longer had support. She had nothing left. The silence was deafening, and she knew she had lost. "We'll see who has the last laugh," she whispered, before turning and leaving. But everyone already knew. She wasn't going to be able to hold it together for long. Over the next few days, Karen tried to hold on, but it was no use. Without the power of the HOA, everyone she had fined, threatened, or regulated over the years finally had the chance to fight back. And wow, did they fight back! In less than a week, the couple in House 42 installed giant Christmas lights in the middle of March just to annoy her. Her next-door neighbor bought a trailer and parked it in front of her house, something she's banned in recent years. Someone put up a banner at the entrance to the condominium with the words, "Now we are free." But the best was yet to come. Remember how the HOA managed the condo fees? Well, Karen was involved with the association's money. And when the residents decided to audit the accounts, they discovered that there were thousands of dollars missing. That's right. Karen not only lost control of the community, she also had to answer for misappropriation of funds. One fine day, 2 sheriff's officers showed up at her door with subpoena papers. She tried to argue, she tried to shout, she tried to say it was all a mistake. But guess what? Nobody believed her anymore. And then she disappeared. From one day to the next, the house was empty. Karen took her things and left. And we never heard from her again. Over time, things returned to normal. Without the HOA, the residents began to sort things out more simply. If someone had a problem with their neighbor, they spoke to them directly. If a house needed maintenance, people helped each other. And do you know what happened? The condominium didn't turn into chaos. It didn't become an uncontrollable mess. In fact, everything got better. And what about me? Well, I still have my 5 cars in the garage, and every time I look at them, I give a little smile and think, it was worth every second. That was today's video, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. So don't forget to leave a like and comment on what you thought.